All right. So, welcome to my presentation in regards to LabVIEW-based native Android and iOS applications, which is quite a mouthful, but it's is what it says on the tin. So, within this presentation, I would like to well make everyone aware on how to create your own Android and iOS applications using LabVIEW, just LabVIEW. So before we begin, let's put down some ground rules. Be nice in the chat. No one likes bickering. Please ask questions. That's the benefit of these live presentations. Ask questions, and I would love to answer them. Maybe there's some interesting insights for me too. And of course, maybe think of interesting examples yourself that you could use in your company, in your daily life, whatever. Feel free to share, and maybe it could inspire others. This is a fairly new subject, fairly new topic, so it helps everyone or you would help everyone by just sharing your thoughts on this. So this presentation is part 3 of a series that I'm doing. So the first part is the presentation I did at Dutluck, which goes into the basics. How does this framework, or how can you make this work? How can you use LabVIEW and jam it into your phone, maybe use an emulator, and how can you use it? So that's what I discussed there, how to access sensors, how to access the camera. Then a couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation at MLOG, which was more oriented towards the maker community. So this is based on the G Web development module, or NXG, what it was in the past, which is part of the community licenses. So, which means if you want to use it at home, you can just use it. And the entire topic there was, okay, how can you use this to breathe some new life into your old phone that's just laying around there? Maybe use it as some type of embedded controller to, for example, the example I made there was my greenhouse, to just control it through my phone instead of buying another Raspberry Pi with all the accoutrements attached to it to make it work. No, just use your phone, plug it in, and you're almost good to go. And then, of course, we have this presentation. So this is going to be more focused towards industry applications, using it within your company or offer it as a product to your customers. So first of all, I would like to start with the .log presentation review, because during the mlog, I noticed that not going back to the basics went over like lead balloons. So I will give a quick recap on that presentation. After that, I will have a quick discussion with you in regards to, or we'll have a quick talk about application improvements. So how can you improve the applications compared to the .log presentation to make your application stand out, feel much more natural, and of course, faster. I will talk about security considerations, because if you're talking about the industry, you will definitely need to look at, okay, how can I make this as secure as possible so that people just can't easily mess with my systems. I will talk about, the phone as a hardware replacement, which falls under one of the use case, and then we'll also talk about the use cases. So how or what could you use this already for, even though it's still a developing environment, architecture, it already has some kind of some business cases, even though it's not fully mature yet. So that's what I would like to, or I will discuss. Danny, yes, the .log and the mlog presentations are on YouTube. Unfortunately, I do not have a link right at hand. If you can't find them, please remind me at the end of the presentation. I will quickly look them up and put them in the within the chat window. So before we start, who am I? So, well, I'm Nathan Biesmans. I am a CLA. Thank you, Stefan. I am a LabVIEW R&D architect at Qplox Engineering, hence why the logo left down there. And I'm currently deployed at ASML as a lead engineer within the tooling department. Also, I used to be an application engineer at NI. For those that I helped, glad to see you again. For those that I couldn't help, I'm really sorry. So next up, the development basics, so .luck recap. Well, we're going to talk about the basic architecture. How can you start using your own applications, or how can you start building your own applications? And then also how to access device hardware, because, okay, it's cool if you can make something pop up, make something bounce, but who cares about that? I want to measure my accelerometers, read something through the GPS, or take a picture. So first of all, the basics. Everything that we're going to talk about is built on top of the Cordova framework. So the Cordova framework is a type of WebView for your phone. It's compatible with both Android and iOS, and even actually other environments. It used to be compatible with BlackBerry when that still was relevant. And it's also compatible with Windows. So you could potentially use it there, but it's mostly used for Android and iOS. With this, it's really, with this, you could, for example, import the WebVIs. Just put them, build them, place them in there as if they're on the server. However, when you just put them in there, so you can have JavaScript, HTML, it's written down here. You can have plugins to access different types of hardware. But when you plug them directly in, yeah, there's this little issue where LabVIEW web modules, they need to be served through a server. There are ways around this, but it's really tedious. It comes down to fixing up the Cordova environment, the vRio environment on which WebVIs are built. It's a hassle. I don't want to bother you with that. So let's just put server on Cordova as a plugin. So you can start, there's a JavaScript that runs at startup, which starts server, which is linked to a specific folder. All of this, you can find it on my GitHub, but also I go into much more depth on this in the .luck presentation. So, like I said, start a server, and then all you need to do is place your build application within the folder. Use an in-app browser to, well, show it on your phone. So it's similar to what you would, for example, see if you accidentally click on an ad in YouTube and it opens up that pop-up window, shows a browser within your app. Within the examples I've given, it's configured in such a way that you don't actually notice that it's part of a pop-up window. So you have the splash screen, and then it goes over into the in-app window or the in-app browser, and you don't actually see that it's anything else. So that's how this actually works. And then from that window, you can communicate to the Cordova application, and then from the Cordova application back to the window. Another nice feature of the emulator of the Cordova framework is it's compatible with the Android emulator. So instead of creating the application, deploying it like you would, for example, do with the FPGA. I'm going to stop that because I forgot or disabled the noise. But so instead of deploying it and testing if it works on your phone with all the hassle that goes around it, you can just deploy it in an emulator. If for some reason you, for example, brick your build or whatever, you can just start another emulator and you're good to go. So that was the basics on how to, well, start using Cordova really quickly. Another item is sending data to Cordova. So from within LabVIEW, you can send data to Cordova through the in-app browser. There's a WebKit message handler available, which is just a JavaScript string that you need to run, or a JavaScript command that you need to run with a message attached to it. Within the examples I've given, I've provided a couple of sub-VIs, which actually do this for you. So you just have to provide a string. You don't have to worry about all the hassle that's around that. Accessing Resources, well, like I said, you can already do that through plugins. So for example, here I have a little example of the Cordova camera plugin. So all you have to do is call that through the code, for example, through the message telling Cordova to start using the app, the plugin, or take a picture. And then once you have data available, send it back to the in-app browser to the LabVIEW codes. With this, or in this case, Cordova allows you to execute JavaScript code within your in-app browser, within the execution space of LabVIEW, which, for example, allows you to create new variables, which afterwards you can read out within LabVIEW itself. Like I said, I'm going through this really quickly. Is there a plugin for Bluetooth serial port? I did encounter something about that in regards to Arduinos. There's also serial port available for the USB on your phone. Should that be interesting? But it's quite a big ecosystem. So there are metric ton of plugins available. Have a look at them. There are even things about VR, AR, just readily available. So like I said, that's the basics. I'm going through this quite quickly. If you want me to slow down, speed up, please let me know if I'm going too fast. Also, if we have some time over, I'll go through the code at the end of the presentation. So first of all, better UI. A thing that I did not touch upon within the basic .NET presentation, mainly because I did not know that at the time, is, well, by default, you have pan and zoom available, enabled, sorry, which is part of the in-app browser. You just, you have the window pop open, you can zoom in, you can swipe around as if it's a normal website. It does not feel really native, if you know what I'm saying. A normal app, you open it, okay, you can scroll and that kind of stuff. But the application itself has control over that, rather than you being able to pan around just because, due to the scaling of your specific phone, because of your resolution, it doesn't really match up quite nicely. Can I get a repeated session anytime? What do you mean by that? Okay, in regards to the recordings, yes, this will be recorded, and I will try to put all of the 3 different parts together so that, well, you can have a nice Sunday afternoon and hear me talk. Okay, so like I said, you want everything full screen, you want everything embedded, no pan window, no panning, no zooming. It should just work as a whole, just one nice little screen. Now, within Cordova, there is not really a solution to that, but it doesn't need to be, or Cordova doesn't need to have it. HTML5 supports this already. Remember, WebVIs are just JavaScript. This is just JavaScript code, WebAssemblies running within CSS and HTML. So you can actually alter the HTML tag within the WebVIs. And then you can actually say, and again, this will be available in a couple of the examples I give, and also this has also been discussed in the MLOG presentation. So again, also available in the examples I gave there. But HTML5 allows you to alter the viewport. So for example, you can say, okay, the user can't scale. So already this removes the pinch and the zoom. But still, you don't want the panning to be available. So you can set the scale. You can play around with it and tell the width, wide does it need to be, or what does it need to take as a reference. But you can then say, okay, how much is a person able to zoom if you want that, or not at all. And then you do, for example, initial scale, minimum scale, maximum scale, all the same. Then pretty much telling the environment, don't zoom. So that's a nice way to make your application look a bit more professional. Another thing is performance. So this is something I came across when doing image processing on in LabVIEW. So LabVIEW runs on top of JavaScript, or the web module runs on top of JavaScript. JavaScript is calling DLLs within the browser, which those DLLs call CPU functions. Every time you go down, or if you go up a level, you lose performance. It's going to take more memory, something that's, for example, discussed in the microcontroller or LabVIEW microcontroller presentation of Derek and Jim. But so every time you go up, it takes more resources, takes more processing time. So try to go as low as possible. And I have a nice example on this. So when taking an image, I encode it as a base64 string. However, when I want to push it through HTTP, I need to escape the string because there are a couple of illegal characters. If I do that in LabVIEW, a full HD image, so 1080p, it takes about 85 seconds, which is extremely long to just go through the entire string and looking for specific characters, and if you can find them, replace them. It doesn't mean it's extremely slow. It's still 24K iterations per second, but yeah, if you want to process a full HD image, it's not really what you want. However, by just going down one level of abstraction, by just calling a dedicated function, so a search and replace function within JavaScript, suddenly becomes just 6 seconds. That's already more manageable. That somewhere you could allow that if you can allow for the lag. Of course, you can push it down even further, but I'm not going to touch upon that on pushing it to WebAssemblies. But so keep this in mind when building your application and when giving it to customers. If for some reason it takes too long, if it goes a bit too slow, just go down one level of abstraction and let LabVIEW be more of the conductor of the environment that just tells everything what it needs to do. But all the things that need to do something, they know what they need to do. They just need to get the trigger to do it as a function. Another thing, and something that I noticed was overlooked quite a bit, was user settings. So often you would like to, you would like the user to be able to store some specific settings, maybe default user accounts, preferences, and so on. So Cordova allows quite a lot of different ways to do this. First one is file. I am going to share this presentation, and for example, here I have links to the plugins available on which I'm talking about. So within LabVIEW, you can access the file system of your Android or iOS application or system through Cordova. So the plugin is available. You just send it, and it automatically, or through the plugin, it automatically puts it into a file, or you can read it. Also, there are several database options available within Cordova. These can range from simple key value pairs. So just saying, okay, Cordova, please save this key with this value. Or, hey, Cordova, can you give me the value of this key? And it provides it back. All the way up to complete relationship-based databases or relational databases. Sorry. All of those are supported, and some gradations in between. Also, an interesting one is a fingerprint library, which allows you to ask for a fingerprint lock to pop up, to then say, okay, then you can give a key along with it, give a key along with it, or a name, fingerprint, and then and if the fingerprint is correct for the system, it gives you a value back, which is a nice little security feature. Or you can put it on the server. Yeah, we're about halfway within the presentation, so I'll put in something funny. But yeah, so for example, you can put it on a server. If you give this to your customers, you can say it's a cloud. You can put it on AWS or whatever you want. And I actually recommend this. So you can still do little local server config on your phone to tell, okay, this is where you normally would find the server. IP address or just URL name, maybe some kind of basic configuration, but most of it, keep it on the server. benefit of that is you have control of it. If a person goes rogue, a phone gets stolen or whatever, you actually have the controls to say, okay, this account is compromised. Let's delete that account or change the preferences for that phone or whatever. But at least then you have control. If it's all on the phone, yeah, the person that has the phone has complete control and can do whatever they want. So that's a recommendation from my side. But still, in the end, a good solution is a combination of all of these. Another thing is account control. So most of the times you would like to have user accounts, especially when linking to a server. Phone application is often not running in itself, but rather it's linked to one of your systems, a test bench or a data processing unit or whatever. So when using account control, I would highly recommend use existing utilities instead of reinventing the wheel with password management, salting the password, hashing it, stuff like that. Use existing utilities. They have everything available for you, and then you don't have to do all that effort for it to eventually still be a security risk. System Link has a nice utility for it. You can use the LabVIEW domain account manager for as long as that's still standing. Testnet has a nice utility for it, or you can just use LDAP, which I just heard that is also going to Testnet in some future version, maybe. But so yeah, try not to keep everything on your phone, but rather use user accounts if giving it or giving this as an application to a customer. And like I said, define the rights on the server so that you can say, okay, you have access to this and this, and that you can actually update this if for some reason it's needed. If a person is changing position or maybe fired or let go or changes career, then you would want their rights to be removed from the server so that if they're disgruntled, then they can't mess stuff up. Or if their phone gets stolen, IT can immediately save the situation instead of there being a security risk. Another thing is keep credentials within LabVIEW. This is something in regards to security. So the main issue is everything is running as on a server within Cordova, which is great. LabVIEW can run on the server and do whatever it wants. I gave some recommendations within .lug in regards to running everything through a local host. But if for some reason the phone is compromised, maybe a malicious app could pull in the LabVIEW or the environment from that server that you're running locally if they would figure out that it's running and that on which specific port it's running and stuff like that. And they could potentially pull it in. So I would highly recommend keeping the credentials within the LabVIEW runtime itself and don't push them out anywhere. Then it's already don't push them out to Cordova, for example, if it's unless you're really sure. I'm going to discuss on that a little bit later. But so sending it to Cordova, you don't know the parent application that's calling the LabVIEW that it is Cordova unless you have some kind of handshake going on. If you don't have that, it's risky. So in that case, keep it within LabVIEW. Then passwords and usernames and account settings and whatever are. I'm not going to say safe, but at least safer. When coming to computer security, nothing is absolutely safe. It's just make it as hard as possible for hackers, and that's the only thing you can do. Next up, so security. So one of the things that you will notice is how can an application access the network, the server, the test bench? Well, first of all, you can go through the internet. That's what most people prefer, or at least the users prefer. Well, you can access it from everywhere. So there's if you're on some kind of Wi-Fi, as long as you're not using any weird protocol, most networks allow you to access the internet, even if you're in China. and just access your setup system. Also, you don't need a VPN, which is often preferred by users. If you have your personal phone and you're off site or you're at home, you don't want to be on a VPN, because if you're just watching YouTube or whatever, you don't want the IT of your company to be able to look at what you're doing. I just like my privacy. Cons, well, it's insecure. You're running something through the internet, and someone could be watching, someone could be intercepting the messages, which makes it a lot harder to make it safe. And of course, network conditions could change. Maybe suddenly you're using a protocol, but maybe in some way the network that you suddenly switch to, maybe, like I said, China, change their mind and they switch protocol. So that would be the benefit of a VPN. If it's if you're within the VPN, at least you have control on which type of protocols that you could use within the VPN, as long as the VPN itself is permitted. Brings us to internet, or well, local network, even though it can be on different locations. Well, the benefits are, well, it's safe. It's managed by IT, people that are highly specialized in keeping that safe, keeping it secure. And the network conditions, like I said, don't change. So as long as IT allows the different protocols you're using, then it's all good. And of course, the network that is on which you're running the VPN allows VPNs, then you're good to go. Cons, like I said, VPNs can be blocked. Even if you're within another company and access their Wi-Fi and try to open up a VPN to your company, some companies don't allow it. Also, like I said, users don't like to be on the VPN all the time. Like I said, if I have my personal phone, I'm laying in bed, watching some YouTube, playing some music, I don't want to be on IT's radar, looking at what I'm listening to. It's nobody's business that I like Nickelback. I don't actually. Maybe for Tommy, I like Taylor Swift. But so yeah, try to decide between these. Each one has their benefits, each one has their downside. Try to talk with your customers in regards to what is the best solution for them. Next up, security of your files. So let's say you generate some source code, you get your package, your built application that you put on the server. Well, everything is based on the Vireo engine. So this is that open source engine, or well, based on MIT licenses, provided by NI, which is great. It's lightweight. It runs on Raspberry Pi Pico, which is amazing at this point. So really a shout out to Jim and Derek for their excellent work that they did. However, running it on the phone where you have that much processing power, a lot of bad actors can be available or can see stuff. So when you run stuff in the Vireo engine, it's based on VIA files, or they try to obscure it a little bit by putting .txt behind it, but they're VIA files. And you can just open them up in a text editor. And suddenly you can see everything within there. Okay, you need a little bit of expert knowledge to see what's going on, or well, some in-depth knowledge. But for example, if you put in a password or some kind of security string just as plain text or as a constant, then people can actually see what's in there. So please don't put sensitive information in your code. So at least nothing as a constant. There are different strategies to go around this, but just keep this in mind. Don't put your personal password or hidden key in there. Another absolutely important part is communication. Like I said, you don't know who you're talking with within LabVIEW. Maybe it's a Cordova application, maybe it's not. So try to verify that. One thing you can do is a security handshake. So let's say you have some kind of fancy algorithm, maybe communicating with server, trying to see, okay, is this Cordova application, this application I'm talking with, actually the Cordova application? Is it been altered in any way? Try to verify that if security is that important for you, which depending on the industry you're in could be. Another interesting thing is a random server port on startup. Like I said, the LabVIEW application is running on a server within Cordova. Sorry, got sidetracked by the announcement. So it's running on a server. If someone knows the configuration of that server, then they could try keeping an eye out for it to be launched on your phone and then say, oh, okay, now that LabVIEW application is live, let me pull it in and try to pick it apart and try to get to some data. However, if you have a random server port on startup, so look, take a random number, start server. If the port is not available, catch the error, try it again. All of this you can do within the JavaScript of the Cordova application. Again, shout out to the .luck presentation for that one. But so random server ports, given that you know on which port you're starting the server, you also know on which port to ask for the in-app browser to load the web APIs from. So yeah, you can make something nice and secure, or well, at least more secure through this way. And something that I've been using quite lately is close the server once LabVIEW is loaded. So once the entire application is loaded in the in-app browser, you don't actually need the server anymore, unless you're accessing those resources, some more resources from there, of course. If everything is loaded within your in-app browser, there's no need for the server to be live and for a potential bad actor to pull data from it. So keep it close or close it after you're done, and at least you're more safe. Now, next up, a nice little example that I pulled from .luck, which I actually quite like, is phone as a hardware replacement. So I've had a couple of times where people would talk to their managers and ask for this system with expensive hardware for something that most people already have in their pockets. This can be as simple as a barcode scanner, which is actually going to be one of the next examples, or in this case, a data logger. So the example I gave in .luck was, let's say you're walking on a big site, an oil refinery, whatever, and you see an issue, a leak, a faulty light bulb, could be anything. Well, the idea is that you can just look at what what's going wrong and take a picture, as in the demo. And then you can put in some remarks. After you put in the remarks, in this case it's blocky dude, it's sent to the server. In this case, this was a system link server. And when that's sent, it automatically pulls in the telemetry data. So what orientation were you looking at? What was the angle of everything? What was the location? And this is to show that it also works with the phone and not just the emulator. But so yeah, for example, this is a nice application that a customer could potentially want. It's something simple. You could potentially use it as a proof of concept or a one-off. But yeah, so you see an issue, you take the image, log the metadata, and someone else can review it on the server. Another one that I like, something more relevant for me lately, is, well, a simple barcode scanner. So let's say you're working on a test setup and suddenly some manager got in his head to put in a barcode scanner. Okay, yeah, great. We don't have the hardware. Let's try to acquire that hardware. And suddenly acquisitions is saying, no, you don't have the budget for that. You need to approval from him, her. And suddenly you're a couple of weeks further and deadlines are slipping just because you're stuck in slog of management. or build this most simple application to at least get going, that you at least make your deadlines and people can already start working with it. Or maybe just in general say, okay, everyone has their own work phone. From now on, that's the access point for this. So in this example, it was just a barcode scanner plugin, which was really, really nice because it allows a ton of different barcode styles, from QR codes to just barcodes and whatnot. So this is on my phone. I say read barcode, create a custom QR codes. And in this case, it loads in the barcode and I just put in this text instead of just having some weird serial number. I thought, let's put in a little fun string. And here it also tells me which QR code, which barcode type it was, in this case, QR codes. Which again is really useful. Your customers, if they really need something really quick, you can help them out with this instead of saying, okay, acquire this and I'll see you within a couple of weeks. Well, this you can make with about the same amount of effort it would take to figure out the drivers for a barcode scanner, something like that. This brings me to the use cases. So one of the use cases that I see, even though this is still quite a new platform, it's still maturing, but still it's useful as a one-off tool. So let's say you have one customer with a limited amount of users. Well, then you can already start using this, especially because you don't maybe you don't have an Android or iOS developer available, or they're just too expensive for the project. Well, then you can already provide this. Now, even if you think, okay, it's barely within my budget to get an Android and iOS developer, well, it's not only building the application, afterwards it's maintaining the application. I can guarantee you users always come back with, hey, can we change this little thing? And can we do this? And can we do that? If you constantly need to rehire a developer, it becomes really expensive quite quickly. So if you can do it within your own budget, within your own expertise, then great, then why hire someone? Like I said, LabVIEW developers can do it. Especially now we can program microcontrollers, we can do everything. Another use case already is proof of concept. Let's say you have the budget for an external iOS and Android developer. There's still a business case for this. They're costly, so developers are costly. So to optimize this, you want to have as much customer feedback as possible. Say, here is the app, maybe a functional mockup, or initial or quick release function, something that's already working, like a barcode scanner. It doesn't look pretty, but hey, here it is. See how you like it, and based on that, we can make the actual application. And customers can already play with it, say, okay, we like this, we don't like this. We would also like to see this feature maybe work in this way. It needs to be compatible with this. It's a lot easier to get your requirement list if the customer actually has something in their hands instead of just saying, here's a white piece, blank piece of paper, give me a list. So, for example, the initial or quick release version, well, if something is high priority, something needs to be done yesterday, then this is great. You don't have to go through the hiring process. Or maybe just something pre-release. Or my personal favorite, when marketing comes to you and says, hey, we need something really quickly to show what we're actually working on. They're not ready. Can you quickly whip something up? Then, yeah, it's absolutely possible to just quickly make something for it to be shown at a demo, which is already compatible with System Link and stuff like that, just because it's available within LabVIEW itself. And you can code in LabVIEW, which goes a lot quicker than JavaScript or Android or iOS development. So that was that. So as a summary, it was a little .luck review. I went through the UI improvements, or well, actually more general improvements. So we discussed UI improvements, panning, zooming, how to get rid of that, but also performance optimizations. We discussed some setting strategies, which is really relevant for your customers. security considerations. Always something nice to keep in mind, especially if for some reason your application gets audited. It's always good to say, okay, we took this and this and this in mind to get some better grades from the auditors. And we discussed several business cases for this still maturing platform. With that, I want to thank you for listening. And I would like to ask, are there any questions? Yes. So within the platform, you create or you deploy the system. So as if you want to put it on the server, on the LabVIEW server. Sorry, you deploy the LabVIEW application or WebVI application as if you want to put it on an Apache server or anything else. So it's normally just the build process. So I, for example, here have my barcode example. With that, I can say build. I can then open it. So here I have my code. Like I said, here I have my VIA data or my VIA file. All I have to do here is then place it within the Cordova application. Again, shout out to the .log presentation. LabVIEW application, just override what's already there. And then all I have to do is tell Cordova to build this. So for example, for Android, this will build into an APK file. I'm not going to do that now because my system here is not configured. I had to reinstall my system due to some warranty issues. But yeah, so it builds an APK that you can then share. So if I go here, Androids, app build outputs APK debug, because I only have to debug. So here it sends, here you have the APK that you, for example, can put on your phone. And it's actually how I created the barcode example. I just sent this APK to my phone through Bluetooth and then install it. It can be that you need to enable installation of APK files because most phones disable that on default due to security. But you can enable it for just the installation of this file, then disable it again, and then you can take pictures with your app or do data logging. Place this on a drone to get some telemetry or car or whatever. Yeah, so that's how you build it. Does that answer your question? No problem. Any other questions? Or has anyone already some ideas on how they could use it? Using Android applications and iOS applications within for your customers is definitely a nice new tool in the belt. So how would you use it maybe? Just to inspire others, you don't have to disclose company secrets. Replacement of an RS-485 HMI. That could actually be quite useful. So having just a phone or Raspberry Pi with Android on it, maybe, I don't know, sitting there and just providing an HMI and then through Bluetooth serial. But also another one is, I would say, a lot of phones, especially USB-C type ports, phones with USB-C type ports, are really useful to have serial bus enabled. So there are serial plugins which allow you to go from USB to certain type of serial communication. And with USB Type-C compared to micro USB, USB Type-C allows you to charge the phone while having data coming out of it. So that's an interesting thing. With micro USB, you can't. If your phone is sending data out of it, if your phone's the master on the USB, then you can't charge your phone, which you can with USB Type-C. And this was actually one of the considerations that I've taken within the mlog. Yeah, definitely. So it can be a permanent setup. So this was one of the considerations that I've taken within the mlog presentation, where I created a greenhouse monitor with some data logging and then some sensors, where I had a Raspberry Pi Pico that was logging data and sending it to the phone to then combine everything in one package to then send it to the server. For that, I used Wi-Fi instead of Bluetooth, just because I had the Wi-Fi shield for the Raspberry Pi Pico laying around, and I didn't have a dongle available to charge my phone while using the USB serial. It was for at home, so I used the cheapest option that I had available at the time. But it's definitely a nice example. So using it as a serial port HMI device. Does anyone have some other idea? Or maybe just not sure if it's possible, and could also be a nice thing to discuss. Reporting after service actions when you have already shown. You mean the one from the .log presentation? My presentation now. Okay, let me. So the phone as a so the data logger example, I mean, take photo and description. Yeah. Could, for example, be useful. So you deploy your system, throw it in some database. Yeah, you deploy your system and you want to log, you want your test bench users to be able to log issues with the test bench. It could be a great hook for your system to allow troubleshooting in the future. So Weeba asked, just wondering if NXG is actually helpful or that eventually you want to go native Cordova. So the issue with native Cordova is, well, it's fully JavaScript. You build your UI with HTML and CSS, which means, well, you need to have knowledge of that. You need to be proficient in that, and you need to keep those skills up to date. If you're constantly working with LabVIEW, this actually is quite cumbersome. So if you just need to have, with this, you can just have some basic knowledge of JavaScript for the plugins. And for the rest, you don't have to do anything. You can just work within LabVIEW, the environment that you're comfortable with, that you know, that you can keep on using. So that's the main benefit of this. You don't have to switch between those different programming languages, those different philosophies. No, you can just stay within what you know. I did not quite, Danny also asked, I did not quite get how to improve performance in practice when you discuss the performance layers. Are you, the example, writing and importing a JavaScript function in the WebVI for a performance specific task instead of writing LabVIEW code directly in the WebVI? Okay, that's a really good question. Sorry that I did not elaborate on that more. So what I mean here is, let's say here you have a LabVIEW function or your LabVIEW code. To go through a string, you would, for example, say, okay, let's say you split everything up in an array. You put in a for loop. You then say, if this character equals this type of forbidden character, percentage or whatever, escape it. Just put a backslash in front of it or whatever the standard is for the communication protocol that you're using. Sorry, lost my train of thought. So yeah, you can do that with that for loop. You could use potentially regex, but still that's building on top of that WebAssembly. JavaScript, which you can call from within LabVIEW, can do this more natively. So it goes one level down. Instead of calling multiple JavaScript functions, which in themselves have overheads, both in memory and CPU cycles, by just pushing it down to JavaScript itself, one JavaScript function, it means a couple of DLL functions, but those are a lot quicker than going one layer up. And I do not have an example right away to give on that one. I do on my other laptop, but for some reason my network is giving me grief today, so unfortunately I can't remote into it. Also keeping an eye on the time. So for example, here, within the examples I've given, like I said, I do have a couple of sub PIs available. So instead of knowing the exact or functions that you need to execute, you can just copy and steal this. I don't really mind. And you can just execute a piece of code. So in this case, yeah, you say, instead of having a for loop or whatever, you can then say, okay, replace some value as the function or the replace function within JavaScript. Now, in this case, that will not work, as yeah, this code is doing something different. In this case, it's calling the barcode scan function, and if that does that correctly, or if it gets a valid barcode, it sends the data back. But again, this in itself is also an example of this. Instead of taking an image and doing all of that processing in LabVIEW using some kind of LabVIEW function that's ported to NXG or ported to the web VIs, by just doing that within Cordova itself, which often is built on more low-level functions, it goes a lot quicker. So instead of clicking on it and taking a picture and waiting 10, 20 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, like you've seen in the example, it was near instantaneous that you got your answer. Is it now more clear? No worries. Okay, we're going now. Any other questions or remarks or just curious? Waiting for a reply to apply, waiting for a problem to apply the solution. Definitely keep me posted if you're willing to share. It's really interesting to see where this ends up. I'm really proud of this one, and yeah, I really want to see where this goes. It would be a pity to see it die, not being used. Rather, yeah, see it become part of the LabVIEW ecosystem. I'll find you at Dullock. I will not read that as a threat, but I will be definitely looking forward to discuss this further with you. Cheers. Okay, we're reaching the end. 58. Are there any more questions? Okay, then I want to thank you all for watching my presentation, watching me talk, and If you have any questions that pop to mind at a later stage, please send me an email. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Nathan Biesmans. And as you've seen in the example, you can also find me on the LabVIEW forums as Peanut Butter and LabVIEW. Okay, in that case, thank you everyone for your time and catch you later.